Hopefully I don't echo or anything. So welcome, as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Kayla. I am a registered dietitian here in Cincinnati. I work kind of independently out in the community, as well as a couple different specific organizations. I teach at UC, which is a lot of fun. But I previously worked in oncology up in Chicago, actually. So as I expressed to Jennifer from the get-go, I love this community, and I love, the opportunities that treatment and survivorship provide. So honored to be with you guys today. I love food. I love cooking. So I wanted to make this a fun kind of picnic style recipe day. So hopefully these recipes aren't too complicated. I wanted to choose something that could be served cold. So if you want to take it out to a picnic, you don't have to worry about heating it up or anything like that. You'll also notice that in these recipes today, I'm going to be using some ingredients across the board in both of them. So certain items you may have considered only to be savory or actually can be used in a sweet dish as well. So that was kind of the justification on picking these, and maybe a little bit of a unique recipe that you haven't tried before. So we are actually going to get started with our dessert recipe, the avocado tofu mousse. Again, it might be a little unique. I hope, if you've never had something like this before, it may surprise you. Avocado is one of my favorite foods. It's super versatile. Like I mentioned, it can be sweet, it can be savory, it can be a snack on its own. We know that avocados are super, super high in the healthy fats. So, a lot of foods get a bad rap for having maybe too much fat or, a lot of other associations, but avocados are phenomenal. They're a great ingredient, and they've got a great texture that, lends well to a lot of things. So before I actually get ahead of myself, if you are cooking along with us, we are going to start with the avocado mousse, but if you're making the pasta dish, I want you to go ahead and fill a pot up with water, set it on the stove, and then we'll get that to boiling, just so that we can have a nice flow of everything we're cooking. So I've already got my pot of water back here. I am going to turn it up medium-high, just so that everything can start boiling while we're making this mousse. So ingredients for our mousse, again, maybe a little bit untraditional, but it's a nice way to kind of try something different, add a little bit of protein and healthy fats to your dessert. So I've got my block of tofu here split in half. I'm going to use half of it for this mousse recipe, and then we're going to use half of it in our pasta recipe. So again, that cross-utilization of ingredients is nice because then you don't waste, and you can kind of get a little bit creative with some of your ingredients. So we're going to be making this all either in a food processor or blender. So whatever you have, we're going to add anywhere from about a half a cup to a cup of that tofu. So if you're not familiar with using or cooking tofu, there's a couple different kinds of tofu. What I specified on the ingredients list, for you guys, I tried to save this container so you could see what, if you've never bought it at the grocery store. Totally demolished the package though. So it's known as silken tofu. So it's a little bit softer than some of the other tofus out there on the market. You may see firm, extra firm. You may even see some that are sprouted, or even like a high protein tofu. So there's a lot of different varieties. In general, tofu is a soybean product that's been pressed into a block. So within that, we might get questions on, I've heard to avoid soy. Is it not great for me? Research has shown that in moderation, the natural soy products such as tofu, edamame, tempeh are, again, in moderation. They, as much as possible, they're not, manipulated or processed, are okay. It's where we get into some of the the processed soy products where there's a lot of extra fillers and processing, and they're just not natural, is where, I would heed caution with using a lot of soy, whether you're, cancer treatment or just regular individual. So That's kind of my disclaimer on soy and tofu. So anyways, I've got my tofu in my blender. From there, we're gonna add a half a cup or, you know, maybe a little bit more if you've got it, of milk. So I'm actually using today, I wanted to kind of show you guys some of these products. I'm using a product that I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with. Again, it's not to like blast this brand or say you have to buy it, but it's a nice option if you've ever experienced any sort of lactose intolerance, especially as a side effect of treatment. This is made with a certain kind of essentially, it only comes from the A2 protein. It's a certain type of milk from a cow. So it, again, is usually sometimes more easily digestible. That said, again, not necessary if you're tolerating regular milk, okay. You could also use an almond milk, hemp milk, goat milk. You could use anything you want in this. You could even actually, now that I'm saying all these milks, you could add a coconut milk because that would add a really nice like nutty coconut flavor to our dessert. So options are all yours. That's what I'm using. So I'm gonna add my half a cup to the blender. From there, we're going to, if you haven't already, de-pit and take the skin off your avocado. This is one of my favorite tools ever in the kitchen because cutting avocados can be one of the most dangerous things you'll ever do. Seriously, I've heard from very many hand surgeons that avocado cuts are like up there in ED visits. So this I got off of Amazon. It was like 10 bucks. Essentially, it's a plastic blade that'll help you cut, and then you can get the pit out with this little part, and you can even make nice little lines. So anyways, not necessarily saying you all have to go right out and buy this either, but if you've ever experienced difficulty with your avocado, highly recommend this. It'll scoop it out, it'll take everything out. So again, from there, you're just gonna mash all that avocado in there. If I'm ever going too fast, too slow, you want me to slow down, let me know. You can certainly pause. So you want your avocado to be nice and mushy. You want, again, this to be like a nice mousse. So riper the better. Another option for this dessert, if you're like, hey Kayla, I'm not really feeling the avocado yet, I'm not on that train, a banana, a mashed banana, and some applesauce would also be a nice ingredient that you could use that might not be as obscure, let's say that. From there, I'm gonna add in my sweetener. I've got everything kind of combined into one bowl. So anytime you're cooking, you've heard the term mise en place. It's a nice way to make sure that everything is in its place. And so you don't have to be running around every which way, measuring, finding ingredients, and then realizing you don't have something. So getting everything together and measured out is really helpful and efficient. So in this little bowl, I've got a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract, about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup or honey, whatever you have. And then I've also added a little bit of flaxseed. Just because I had it is optional. It'll add in a little bit more of those healthy fats that we were talking about before, and also a little bit of fiber. So anytime you can add natural fiber, healthy fats to a recipe and you seemingly can't taste it, I'm a fan of that. All right, so adding that in. And then from there, we're gonna add in the cocoa powder as well. So about 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. You could use, I'm trying to think of the different types of cocoa powder. I have just a regular, you could use a dark chocolate cocoa. If you're familiar with cacao nibs, you could also use those. They're a little bit different in the world of cooking. They might take a little bit harder to blend up, but that's another option. So essentially, I think I've got all my ingredients in there. I'm gonna go ahead and hop over to the blender and blend this on up. So now would be a good time if you have any questions about this recipe, the ingredients, and how we're going on with this. So might get loud in here. All right. Blend it up. Look at that. Who's surprised at how this turned out?
Looks good to me. Too bad we can't actually have someone.
I know. So
right now, anyway.
Yeah. So one thing that across the board in cooking is, I mean, a common thing to emphasize is taste as you go. So I'm gonna, before I get this all out of my blender, taste, because you want to see, okay, is it too avocado-y? Is it too sweet? Is it not sweet enough? In this case, I would say I probably could use a little bit more honey or maple syrup or even a little vanilla to kind of bring out some of those flavors. Another thing I might consider adding at this point is actually a pinch of sea salt. So salt in a sweet recipe will actually kind of bring out some of those sweet flavors. It's not necessarily in a small amount going to make it taste salty. So you could think about adding anything else at that point. But the kind of the backstory on us making this first is that it's better chilled. So we are gonna take it out of the blender, put it in a container, and allow it to chill to be served later, so that, you know, all of the flavors kind of develop and it gets some time to just set a little bit. So that would be the case if you were doing a regular mousse, tofu mousse, whatever kind of mousse you're doing. You'd want, again, it to be nice and chilled and let those flavors come together. So now would be a good time to point out that I also think that this recipe or a similar type structure would be a good idea, or could be a good idea for a breakfast smoothie. So I kind of have a reputation that I like to do weird things with food, and I had told a group of individuals at one point that I put tofu in my smoothies, and they were like, "That's odd." Like, well, it adds a nice creamy texture. It really doesn't add any flavor. You can't taste it. And it adds a little bit of protein and some good ingredients. So avocado does the same thing. You can kind of take off some of the sweetness from other ingredients and it adds a really nice texture. So this could be a similar thing. You could add in some fruit to it. You could add a little bit more milk or ice to make it creamy. So avocado mousse can also be an avocado smoothie. All right, my water's really starting to boil, so I'm just gonna turn it down a little bit. I'm gonna set this in the sink to rinse it out because we're gonna be using basically the same set of tools for our next recipe. So, all right, so letting that soak. Pretty simple, right? I also like to do the game where I have people over, or if I'm going to a picnic, not so much in COVID times, but I'll make things and it'll be a guess the ingredient type activity. And so people have gotten really, I don't want to say muted to the things that I try sometimes, but you know, I'll bring something to a party and everyone will just say, "What's in this?" It's like, no, they're just regular cookies, I promise. So anyways, you can either chill this in the refrigerator or the freezer. I would just, if you've got it in the freezer, just watch out so it doesn't get too frozen and then you have to thaw it. All right, moving right along. Any questions? I don't think there is anything yet, right?
Yes, we do in a moment. I think we have some coming. It's going to take me a second. I just have to email out an ingredient list to one of the participants, and then I can get to anyone's questions. Just please put the questions in the chat box so that I can moderate those. That would be great. And we do have a question. I can send this question over to you while I'm sending this email. My breast cancer was hormone positive, so I was told to avoid soy. Do you agree? This one is more of a, maybe a question if that's what a doctor recommended. We always suggest you go by what your doctor is saying. Versus, you know, Kayla can answer some questions that are more geared towards the dietary and the foods, but tell me if I'm wrong, Kayla, about that. Is just go back to what your doctor's recommending.
Yeah, so, I would say that there's definitely the general recommendation too with certain types of breast cancer to avoid soy. There's no harm in avoiding soy. You might have a doctor in a different capacity with the same diagnosis who might say soy in moderation is okay. But again, back to what your oncologist said, they may have a specific reason that, it's just better for you to watch out for it. But as I kind of mentioned before, generally speaking, it's more so some of the heavily processed soy products like the crackers and chips and bars and things that where soy might not have been there anyways, that it can be a fine line at that. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, everyone's got a different set of conditions and reasonings for things. So I would go with that for sure.
Excellent. Thank you, Kayla.
Yeah. Got cocoa powder everywhere, so I need to get my apron next time.
Yeah.
All right, so moving right along, I think, right? Unless there's any other questions that come up.
You are good. Go for it. And everyone, just please feel free to keep sending your questions along.
Yeah, I don't want you to forget. So feel free, again, put them in the box as you get them. So, all right, so if you are cooking along, hopefully your water is also up to boiling at this point. So I'm going to empty my pasta into the box. I should have mentioned this earlier, but everything's kind of going all at once. In general, when we're making pasta, when you're making any sort of noodles, you want to salt your water. You're not, there's a general recommendation out there in the world to avoid salt, limit salt. Yes, but the salt in the water does kind of help flavor the noodles. Not a lot of that's going to actually pass on to the noodles. It helps the water come up to boiling faster. So you want to salt your water. If you've never done it before, maybe it could be a new trick to try. So to talk about, the pasta that I'm going to be using today, I really like this and other similar brands for times when I'm making a plant-based dish. So Banza is just, again, one brand, one type of pasta that uses chickpeas, and it kind of goes over a nice little comparison on the back. But essentially, a serving of this will give you about 23 grams of protein, 8 grams of fiber, and it's a good, source of protein, a nice filling dish, especially if you're trying to cook more plant-based or just avoiding certain meat products certain days of the week or altogether. So Banza is one. I think there's Pow is another brand, but there's a lot of nice products out there, and I can attest that picky eaters have said that it tastes very similar to other types of pasta. So again, something to think about trying. The only thing with this is I would say that they may have slightly different cooking times than your regular pasta. So just being mindful of that. All right, I'm gonna kind of try to shift my camera down a little bit. I wanted to take us through some of the different chopping of the veggies so that you can see what we're going through here. I did chop up some of my celery already in advance, but in general, I think it's, anytime you're coming through a new veggie, it's helpful to see, some best practices. So with celery, with anything that's obviously rolling around, you want to try to find a flat surface. Again, going back to nice safety, I always pinch the blade, or you can pinch the handle with 2 fingers, wrap the rest of your fingers around. Try not to keep any fingers out in no man's land. You want to be in control, and it is okay to pinch the blade and wrap the rest of it around. From there, any type of vegetable you're working with, you want to make sure that you're looking for flat surfaces. So I'm gonna cut this in half once just to get a more workable size. From there, I'm gonna go back through, turn it slightly so again, it's in control, and just cut off a few slices here. You'll notice with my other hand, I'm working as much as I can to keep those fingers out of the way. From there, I've got these nice little strips, and keeping the knife blade down on the cutting board, I'm gonna come back through like a rocking chair, and move my knife. I don't want to move this. This is stable, keep everything there. Move your knife. That way you have the most control over what you're doing, right? All right, so it takes practice, but in general, it's a lot easier on your joints and your wrists if you keep that knife down and just that nice cutting motion. So that's celery. We're gonna cut that off to the side. I've got my red pepper. This is one of the ingredients, or you could also use a green onion, green pepper, anything of the sort. I'm trying to think if there was any other option. Oh no, wait. I guess I just put medium red pepper for some color. So bell peppers can be cut in a couple of different ways, but the most common way that I will actually do this is with, first I'm gonna cut off the top. So again, we're working for those flat surfaces. I'm gonna cut off the bottom. From there, you can, if you have a good grasp of it, you can kind of scoop out those fleshy insides. Either compost or dispose of those items. Then I'm gonna go back through. I've got my little bell pepper. I'm gonna make one slit. That'll open it up. From there, you can kind of tear it apart. So if you've ever cooked or worked with bell peppers, you might notice that one side is kind of, you know, thick and rough. The other side is a little bit waxy and slick. So in terms of best safety, you'd want to make sure that you're cutting on the rough side. If you're cutting on the waxy side, your knife might be more likely to slip. So I'm gonna go back through, same as before, keeping my
Kayla,
yeah.
a participant asked, are you also sliding the knife a little when you're rocking it? Are you kind of sliding it forward?
Yeah. So kind of like a, I'll turn from the side. So I am kind of moving it like a rocking chair a little bit, moving it forward. That's probably a better angle, right? You can see that a little bit more. Then I'm gonna turn it back through. I've got my strips. So just think down and push through, down and push through. So then again, we've got our nice little pieces. Again, we are gonna just mix this all up, so I don't necessarily care that everything's the same size. We're also going to be, we're not gonna be cooking these veggies unless you wanted to. If you don't like raw veggies and you need to cook them a little bit, you could easily steam them a little bit or microwave them or even saute it. But for this dish, we're gonna kind of keep the crunch in there. So because we don't need even sides for even cooking, you know, have at it, you know, be as creative with the sizes as you like. So I'm just gonna go back through, slicing all the way through. Again, this takes time. It takes a little bit of retraining your brain, especially if, you know, you were always someone that did a lot of that. That's okay. But again, it might just be better in the long run to just slow down and work on that slower motion. So I'm gonna add my bell peppers to a bowl. Then I have my celery in. I'm gonna pop this up because I'm gonna check on my pasta. All right, are we going at good speed? Can everyone still following, I hope? Hopefully.
I think it's great. If anyone else needs some extra time, please just send me a chat. Or you can, I think probably at just this juncture, you could probably say so. I think that's okay too.
All right, so got my pasta, it is done. So I'm gonna take it over to the stove quickly and, or not the stove, the sink. I don't need to cook it anymore. So I'm just gonna go ahead and strain that out. I'm gonna reserve or keep a little bit of the pasta water in there just to keep things from sticking together to you know, avoid some of that like just hard clump together. If you've ever cooked a lot with pasta, you may have followed recipes that actually use the pasta water as a sauce to kind of get things going. That's a really easy way to, again, not have to, you know, reinvent the wheel with cooking. Like you can use some of the things that you're already cooking with, and it makes a nice flavorful dish. So we've got our red pepper, we've got our celery. We're gonna go through onion now. So I specifically didn't have Jennifer have you guys cut your onions ahead of time because I wanted to go through and kind of show you how to cut an onion safely, effectively, and cleanly. And doing it this way is actually, we're gonna try to eliminate how many cuts we're using so that there's a theory that the less cuts will help if it makes you teared up as you do this. So I don't know if that's true. I blame my contacts for helping me out, but again, it's a thought. So again, I'm gonna go back to having my claw. We've got two sides of two sides of the onion. We've got the part with, you know, kind of like the stranglies, and then we have, excuse me, we have the root end. So I'm actually gonna cut off that end and set that aside. Another fun little trick with an onion is once you've got the one little head, that actually goes back through and you can pick up the little pieces sometimes, not today. So again, I've got my flat surface. So I'm always looking for that flat surface. From there, I'm gonna cut it in half so that I have two more flat surfaces. I'm gonna peel off the extra outside layer so we don't need to eat that part. And again, compost or whatever you gotta do with the outside. From there, I'm gonna do a skill that if you're uncomfortable in making this kind of cut, I understand you don't have to do this, but essentially I'm gonna put my hand on top of the onion, flare my fingers out, and just kind of go 1/2 to 3/4 of the way in. Just be careful with that one. From there, you'll notice there's lines on an onion that kind of just go around the outside. I'm just gonna, again, go 3/4 of the way up and slice relatively along those lines. So it's gonna stay together with the root at that top, or the stem at the top. I'm just gonna come all the way around. So for the most part, the onion will still be together. I'm gonna turn it back forward and then just go down through, and you should have your slices or your dices already ready. So again, you shouldn't have to go back through and do any more cutting. You just already got your small pieces ready. Magic, right? Maybe. All right, so if you had green onions instead, if you prefer more of like a green onion or a scallion, that would also be a nice ingredient to add to this recipe. So I'm gonna add that to my bowl. So far, we're getting a lot of nice color in here. We've got celery, we've got our red onions. You could also add in, I've got another little part of my avocado from before. So if I wanted to add that in, I could add that in or add it into my dressing. Another optional ingredient I mentioned towards the bottom was either edamame, which is a fermented soybean, they're green. Or if you've got any corn, frozen corn, you can add that as well. Again, just give it a little bit more color. The more colors we eat, the more nutrients, vitamins, minerals we get. So again, got all of that in there. I'm gonna set this off to the side and we're gonna work on our dressing. So the dressing, or essentially what holds this all together, the binder in this recipe, we're gonna go back to that tofu. So I've got the other half of my tofu and gonna grab my blender again, or if you have a food processor, that would work as well. I'm gonna wipe this out so we don't get any mousse in our pasta. Might not be all bad, but you know, if we're serving a crowd, they might not want to see those brown specks. So, all right, so from there, what we're gonna add into our blender, let's see if I can turn this down again so you guys can see, we're gonna add about a 1/2 cup or let's see, what does its actual recipe say? It says about a half a cup of silken tofu, but add anywhere from a half a cup to a cup or whatever you have left in your block.
Kayla,
Yeah.
I do have a question. What do you recommend as a substitute for tofu?
So if you didn't want to use the tofu, you could, if you weren't, vegan or vegetarian, you could also use hard-boiled eggs. You could use the egg white. You could also use a Greek yogurt or any type of yogurt. I was actually thinking about adding in a little bit of yogurt as well. Just it kind of helps with that creamy texture. You could also do part yogurt, part avocado. Mayonnaise would be another option. So anything kind of in that like thick and creamy category would work well. Yeah, good question. I was also going to say I've got another plant-based item here that you wouldn't necessarily use in the dressing per se, but if you wanted to, kind of make it like a cold chicken salad instead of the chicken, tempeh, if you're familiar. Again, I apologize because this is actually another soy-based product, but it is a really high protein plant-based product. So fermented soybeans are processed and pressed into tempeh, and this can be found at any grocery store for the most part, Kroger, Whole Foods, Target, and a block is about $3, and it's about 2.5 servings each. So it's a pretty good, plant-based option economically as well. So you could also crumble this into your final product, use this as well to kind of, again, get a little bit more protein and some nice texture in there.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Where do you purchase your A2 milk and the pasta?
Good questions. So A2 milk, I got at Kroger. I got it on sale today because I guess no one else wanted the A2 milk. And the pasta I also got at Kroger. So usually Bonza and some of the other ones, they might put them in like the gluten-free or the organic section, but I usually typically shop actually at the downtown Kroger, and it's just in the regular aisle because everything's kind of just no special sections down there. So all of these ingredients, I wanted to make them accessible. So you can get them at Kroger, Target, Walmart, probably actually has a really good price on all of them too. So good questions. All right, so we've got our silken tofu in here. I'm going to add our spices. I've got salt and pepper already measured out. So I've got about a 4th teaspoon of salt, black pepper, and garlic powder. Actually, I didn't add the garlic powder. I'm using fresh garlic cloves that were chopped up. So that goes to say you could use fresh garlic powder, and salt and pepper in there. So those are in there. I have, I'm actually going to be using dried dill in the recipe today. So if you wanted to use fresh dill, you would actually use a little bit less, you would use a little bit more. In a dried product, similar to dried fruit, the flavor is a little bit more concentrated in the dried product. So I believe we're using 2 tablespoons of dried dill. I don't believe in measuring a lot, so I'm just gonna.
So then if you do use fresh dill, how do you recommend cutting it up? Just pulling off the heads?
Yep, you could just pull off the heads. Since you are gonna food process it, you don't really typically need to chop it down at all unless, you had the knife out and you wanted to go for it. But yeah, you could just tear it off, pop it in the blender or food processor because it'll kind of stir it up in that way.
Great.
So from there, I've got about 2 tablespoons of vinegar. You could use white wine vinegar, distilled vinegar, apple cider vinegar, honestly, whatever you have. And then I mix that with 2 tablespoons of, olive oil. You could also use a little bit of canola oil, avocado, walnut oil, whatever you have. Again, we're not cooking with this oil. It's just a flavoring agent. So whatever type of flavor you want to bring into the dish, you could use. And as I mentioned, I was using garlic cloves, or minced garlic. So I added that in there as well. Like I mentioned, I had some avocado that was already open, so I'm actually gonna probably scoop out some of the avocado and use that in this dressing as well, just because it's there. Paula Deen, I used to watch her cooking show a lot, and she used to do that with butter. She would just see butter laying out and decide to add it in. So I'm kind of like the Paula Deen, but with avocado. So can't go wrong with either. So again, this is our dressing. So we're gonna just go ahead and start it in the blender. I've made this recipe a few times, and I know that when I do it, I typically need to add water as I go. So you could either start by adding about a tablespoon of water right now, or you could just, again, see how, you know, maybe your tofu didn't have all of the water pressed out, so it's gonna release a little from that. So kind of go as you can with that. All right, I probably didn't soak my tofu enough because it's definitely didn't need any water. All right, so get your spoon back out. If you've got tasting spoons, little white ones, I don't know, you could grab those as well. Good. I do think it needs a little bit more dill, so there I go for not measuring accurately before. But that's something that you can add more at the end as well, as you see everything come together. If you want to add a little bit more at that time. So we've got our dressing. We've got our veggies chopped up, and we've got our pasta. So basically, whatever, wherever you want to add things, you can go ahead and start combining. Turn this down a little bit so hopefully you can see that as well. So again, I got my veggies in here. I'm going to go ahead and break these noodles back up. Again, I used elbows, but you could also use shells. You could use like the little like rotini spirals, whatever you want to, again, however pretty you want to get it. Sometimes there's even some of the different colored pastas out there, but essentially, again, right now I've just got my veggies, my pasta. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in that sauce. So you can add this in stepwise fashion if you're not sure you're going to need all of it. Take it incrementally. Go ahead and add more as you go. So again, this dish, you can eat it cold, but you can certainly eat it warm if you are more of a fan of warm pasta. You know, texture can be a little bit tricky for some people, so, you know, you can have it lukewarm, you can have it cold, warm it up, whatever works. You could also even add like some feta cheese, mozzarella cheese would be a really nice addition to this. You could add some avocado chunks now if you wanted to do that. Otherwise, give it one last taste with some of those crunchy vegetables. As good as always. So, in a nutshell, or not in a nutshell, but more or less in a nutshell, that's our simple, easy pasta salad. So, like I mentioned before, I make this dish a lot because it's a nice dump dish. Whatever sort of veggies you have on their last life, whether they're canned, frozen, fresh, dump them in. Really simple, hopefully easy dressing that you make at home so you can control what goes into it. Again, you can use any sort of veggies that are maybe going bad in the dressing as well, like the avocado, throw that in there. And then again, I think that the tofu adds a nice creaminess, nice flavor, nice texture that you might not get elsewhere. So let's get I'm gonna get my mousse out of the fridge. From there, a finishing touch would be on something like this. You could serve it with a little whipped cream, or you could even top it off with some berries. So I do particularly like this with like raspberries or strawberries. So I would then go ahead and add, you know, however many you want to your dish. So it is maybe looks more appetizing from that regards, with a little bit of fresh berries, maybe some whipped cream on top. So that was it. Those are our recipes. quick, simple. I think we did that in under 30 minutes maybe. So hopefully nothing too laborious or intimidating. Again, you can swap up the ingredients, use whatever you have on hand, and just get creative with it.
Both of them look delicious.
What was that?
That both of them look delicious if you ask me.
Oh yeah, good. I wish I could share, but
Yeah, well, one of these days when we're back at the office, we'll be able
yeah,
to share food again. It's one of the most exciting parts, as I'm sure many of the participants today are aware.
mm-hmm.